Paltrocast. The first question I'm going to ask is a two-parter at Blake. Do I call you Blake or Luxury? That's part one. And part two, how are you?
Okay, that's a lot for me to remember. Let me see if I can get the answers in the order they were received. Blake or Luxury are fine, as you wish, as you prefer. And I've already forgotten the second question.
How are you today?
How are you?
Oh, that's an easy one. I am much better than I was a week ago when I was in bed with COVID for my first time after 3 years of successfully avoiding it. My luck ran out. So I'm great compared to how I was.
You're doing good, except for the journalists asking you the same questions over and over again, I assume. Now, Diallo,
All good.
Question one, how are you? And question two, what was in the can that you just drank from?
I'm doing good, mainly because I drink skin tea. Skin tea. Get healthy.
Do they endorse one song, or will they endorse a few?
No. That was free. That was free. You just happened to catch me while I was drinking something that apparently benefits skin, hair, nails, joints, and overall well-being.
Well, I'm speaking to two people who clearly are doing well with the well-being, because
A+.
Because you're two people that have multiple job titles and you're successful in all those job titles, kind of like a Chael Sonnen or a what's that name, Pat McAfee, where you go, you got 7 job titles. I don't know how to call you. So
I was going to say, everything we touch turns to gold. We've got the Midas touch, but then I was like, how does King Midas die? I don't know the end of that story. So maybe there's a better analogy.
From a muffler, I think.
Yeah, he got into car repair.
Sucked on a muffler, right? The old banana in the tailpipe.
Well, I don't know who's going to answer this one, but who came up with the idea to work with who for one song?
It kind of came about really organically.
100%.
You know, I went in and shot an episode of a Snoop Dogg show and met one of the Erics who we now have the pleasure of working with. And he was like, hey, dude, I think you're really funny. And why don't we talk about doing something down the road? Around that same time, you know, I had met Luxury from his videos on Instagram and TikTok. And we had been talking about, it seemed like every time we would call to talk about anything, it ended up being about 61 minutes. And I was like, why does this number stick out in my head so much? It sounds like a podcast. And it was also around that time that, you know, Heartbeat was saying that, like, wow, you know, we would really like you to, you know, consider doing this thing with Luxury, because we think you guys would be a great pairing. And he's got a totally different background and a totally different following than you do. And the fact that you guys come from different places, but still link up about music is sort of perfect, perfectly in line with what we'd like to do. So that was in late 2020 or 2021, somewhere around there. It took years for this all to come together. But now that it's here and this is launch day, the first day that you can, you know, drive around your car and listen to us on Sirius channel 97. We're so excited. I'm literally looking for places to drive today, just so I can hear it, you know, when it comes out live on the radio.
I actually literally the same thing. It's I'm gonna dial my LOL radio is channel 96 on the Sirius XM app or in your car, and literally after this, that's what we will both be doing, driving around listening to ourselves.
Do I have it correct that it premieres on Sirius XM through LOL, and then the next day you can find it on Apple and your fine podcast providers?
Exactly
yes,
right.
Wherever you get your podcast, we will be there tomorrow.
Okay, so the Apple right now has the preview trailer up, which means that the correct digital people are doing the correct digital things.
Yes, they are.
How many episodes are in the can, or at least we're allowed to know are in the can?
I think we have 6 now in the can, and we're recording another one tomorrow. So yeah, we're in good shape. Yep.
Now, when I'm not calling myself a podcast professional, I am not doing that. But pretty much if I talk with somebody for 25 minutes, like 20 to 22 of that goes out. For one song, how much of what's recorded actually goes out into is going to go out to our listeners' ears?
Gosh, man, I think every episode might be a little bit different. I think that what we try to do is we try to cut out anything, anytime it just kind of goes, sideways. Obviously, nobody needs to hear that. But I really do think the beauty of the show is that there's a dynamic between Blake and I that, sort of, you would think that we've known each other for, maybe twice as long as we have, at least, even though I would say, because it took so long for the show to come together, 3 years ain't nothing. But I think that there's just a natural flow to the conversation that you don't always get in podcasts, especially when the discussion is about music. There are a lot of people who come to the table and they have a very rigid system of presentation. And I think that apart from the fact that we will always discuss, the parts of the songs, the stems as they're called, we don't come in saying like, oh, it has to be rigidly just this, and this. Like we sort of let the conversation go where it needs to go, and we're only going to leave in the most compelling parts.
Yeah, and if I can just build on that, I think one of the fun things about developing the show, and actually these first few episodes, which we're very much kind of determining what the show is, and we kind of found it, I'd say, relatively quickly, because the team that we're working with is so incredible. We've been very lucky to have just like a super supportive, like both Heartbeat and Sirius, just like a lot of really smart people are helping us figure out how to have this hour be optimized. So in other words, we're not just two guys getting on the mic and winging it, but it's also not like it's not scripted at all, but it's not like the This American Life version where because we didn't want it to just be an audio Wikipedia entry, but we also didn't want it to be just like the cliche of a couple bros chatting. We found a real cool middle ground where we are definitely talking about some stuff that you have never heard before behind these songs you've heard a million times. So it has been important for us to uncover new ways of talking about Notorious B.I.G., More Money, More Problems, the premiere episode, which is Amy Winehouse Rehab. We've got New Order Blue Monday. We've got a whole bunch coming up in season 1 and seasons 2 through 25 and beyond. And we will be playing for you, like the stems. You've never heard these before. The acapellas, just the isolated drums. We'll be talking about the origins. Obviously, I'm the guy on TikTok who whispers interpolation. So we'll be talking about origins and inspiration and interpolations and samples. All that's there, but that's kind of like the way we always talk about it is it's a little bit like if you think about the Larry David method of like on Curb Your Enthusiasm, like that's an improvised show, but they have a little bit of basic structure that you know how they're going to start and end the scene. It's kind of how the show is. We know we're going to talk a little bit about the acapella, but then from there, it's like whatever naturally comes out of Diallo and I as friends talking happens. And then at a certain point, it's like, all right, let's move on to the bass. It's a little less, it's not quite, it's not, random like that. It makes sense throughout the course of the hour, but I really am proud of how we've figured out how to make a show that's very natural, two people talking, but it's got cool stuff in there about music. It's funny. I'm just really happy how it's all coming together.
The Curb is a good analogy because I think that just knowing some of the people on that show, there's absolutely an outline, and there are even a couple of talking points, and that really is how we structured it.
Putting you on the spot here, you mentioned New Order, one of my favorite bands of all time. Now, I'm curious, the knowledge from New Order and Blue Monday, does that come from the Peter Hook camp or the New Order camp? Because you get very different perspectives on all that.
I mean, from episode to episode, the other cool thing is that between Diallo and myself, we both have a genuine love. Like our overlap of musical love and knowledge is massive. And then there's little bits and pieces on the side that I may have a little more. I've read a few more books about Diallo's, like whatever. Like we have a lot of overlap and then a lot of separate categories. I'll just quickly answer for me, for New Order, another of my favorite bands. We share a love for New Order, but I actually literally have read both, not just Peter Hook's book and Bernard's book, but part 1 and part 2 of the drummer Stephen Morris's book. He's got a book divided into two, like he wrote 2 books, and I read both of them. And I also listened to the entire like seasons 1 and 2 of Transmissions, which is a great podcast. And that's after a lifelong fandom. And by the way, just like because we're on the topic, like I literally just got, I just bought on eBay, there's the Peel Sessions Volume 1, because there's this incredible cover of a Keith Hudson song called Turn the Heater On, which apparently was Ian Curtis's, one of his favorite songs. All this to say, I personally am coming at it for that particular song and episode with like deep nerddom. And Diallo brings that exact same thing, for example, to our Notorious B.I.G. Mo Money, Mo Problems episode. So the really cool thing about this show is that like we cover a wide range of musical affection and knowledge and interest. And I think the season 1 track list will reflect that once we reveal all the songs we're doing.
Can I just say,
Oh,
I would say I am firmly in the camp of Bernard Summer.
now I was until
because I loved electronic. I loved electronic. That was a great group, and call me Bernard Summer for life.
I was until I interviewed Hookie, and you realize like what a nice, funny guy he was. And then he retweeted the article, and all the fans retweeted it. And the New Order denied my photo pass request.
Okay.
So
I mean, I think maybe Hookie. I think Hookie got kind of a raw deal. Like literally having read all their perspectives, the Rashomon of New Order is very much in my brain. And I would say that I think Bernard seems like a sweet dude, and you know they all had difficult childhoods in their own way, and it just after years and years of this sort of like implied and direct competitiveness. Don't forget, like after Ian died, nobody wanted to sing. So back on that first record on Movement, they're all singing. At least in the live, there's some great live footage if you haven't seen it where they're touring. Like even literally Stephen Morris, the drummer, has a song, and he was the first to go, guys, I'm out. You two battle it out. But I think once Bernard kind of won that, there was 30-ish years of a little bit of tension, and then it couldn't last any longer than it did.
If you want a really bad Let's Make Everyone Sing album, the last Creedence Clearwater Revival album, John Fogerty said, I won't do this unless we each write and sing a third of the album. Enjoy.
Yes.
Now, I have to say, you know, as we're winding down here, you mentioned there's going to be a Biggie episode where you cover Mo Money, Mo Problems. And one of the most interesting things to me that nobody really talks about from all the classic Bad Boy stuff are the samples. I once heard a story that I think about the No Way Out album, or was it the album before that, that they had to pay 103% publishing on the album out because of all the uncleared samples. So what I'm asking here, Diallo, are there a lot of things that we're going to hear about the samples and all that of?
Absolutely. And by the way, I just want to point out that there will be times when we have guests on the show to talk about music. And I find that like having guests like you on our show is a good way to go because you know a lot about some music too. And it's always, I feel like every time we talk about it, I learn something and hopefully we'll impart some knowledge that other people didn't know. The sampling done at Bad Boy, it's interesting because back then, I think it was sort of like assumed that the height of sampling was coming from Pete Rock and was coming from DJ Premier.
Yeah.
And that Puffy, I mean, at the time it was always said that like Puffy and his team, they did, you know, they took, by his own admission, take hits from the 80s, Don't It Sound So Crazy? And by the way, most of their songs
what you did there, Mace,
were from the 70s, you know? Yeah, exactly. But I think that, look, I think if you go back and you study some of the songs, we absolutely get into the samples. I think we have a whole section of that Notorious B.I.G. episode where all we do is talk about his inspired sampling of Herb Alpert's Rise, which I think up until that time of my life, I always associated that song with, you know, somebody who looks like Burt Reynolds on a bear rug,
yeah,
you know, with a glass of white wine or something like that. But no, he came along and he made it great. What's that?
The white wine is strategically placed.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that look, I think that we'll always talk about the sampling. I always say to Blake that, you know, it's a running conversation of ours that, you know, what is now called interpolation. Mm-hmm. The first time I ever saw that word was when I was one of those kids who, when you bought the CD, you'd flip through it. I would read all the like little notes inside there, and I would see sometimes interpolation, and I figured out, you know, oh, that must be when they sing their own lyrics over, you know, Michael McDonald's I Keep Forgetting. You know what I mean? Like it's just, you know, I always go back to the example of Master P singing Smoking Weed to the tune of Summer Breeze. You know, these were some of the first forays into the world of interpolation that we saw. So there's interpolation, there's sampling. You know, we go into all of it, you know, without making a show that's funny for lawyers. we try to let everybody know what the world is. But lawyers got to laugh too, so we're not excluding them.
Lawyers got to laugh too. Wow. I'm not going to peek after that. That's actually the best quote of the day. So here's what I've learned today. Your podcast is super smart. There's a lot to come. Next time I interview you too, hopefully we'll be able to talk about some of your other projects. I'm one of the biggest fans of Silicon Valley you'll ever meet. So Diallo, big fan of your work there. Blake, I think I might have seen you back in the day from Kelly Jones and Mike Viola.
Oh my God. Wow.
Long story short.
Yes.
But both of you keep up the excellent work and really looking forward to what's to come from One Song and beyond.
Thanks for having us, Darren. That was fun.
Thanks for having us, man.
Paltrocast.